Well, what influences the way? And of course, we've already addressed that. Economics certainly does. There was an article in the New York Times recently about China. You know, they have problems with air pollution, just like we did in the early industrial ages, and so did England and other places. So they're no different in the long run than we've been, as we've tried to improve our economy, and we'll be talking about that later on as well. Economics is very important, and there's a case in the New York Times where they were fracking for natural gas in this little valley, which has been kind of isolated, and even had their own different, unique dialect. And well, it turned out there was problems with the fracking. The water had been contaminated. There had been some explosions and all that, and it had an impact on the way people were living. But the fascinating thing was, and this is not unique to just to them, it's true in this country or any place else, in many other places. A woman was being interviewed, and she said, well, you know, for the money I get from them coming on my land and getting the natural resources, I don't have to grow my own rice anymore. I can go to the store and buy it. And I like that, so even though my water tastes bad, I like it. Well, right there you saw where money is changing what's of value to that person. You know, clean drinking water, no contaminated air. I'll live with that if I can get some money. You know, mining, coal mining, there's been a problem with black lungs disease and from inhaling the dust and the like. If you go back into the history of the mining business, you'll find out that when the laws came along and said, we've got to start improving the situation of mines so there won't be black lung disease, some of the miners said, hey, wait a minute, we don't want that because that might make us lose our jobs. Because the mining company can't make a profit and we'll have to go out of business or whatever the case may be. Another influence on the way our culture behaves is significant others, people that are our friends. How do they influence us? And that in turn, because we make up the culture, that affects the culture. Boy, I'll tell you, this one is so obvious, but sometimes we forget it. Media changes culture dramatically. If you look at our country here, and you look at the kind of language, particularly in the form of profanity, that was allowable or not okay back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, as to what it is today, you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed. Gaming alone, computer games being played by young people is affecting what they think is right and wrong, particularly, you know, if kids sit around playing war games, shooting people all the time, that tends to, and adults for that matter, that tends to desensitize us relative to the worth of another human being. Now, I'm not some radical guy, but I think if you go out there and look at the sociological data, you'll see that's the case. Certainly it impacts how we buy things. I mean, there's no question about that. We won't get into that till later when we talk about tech transfer and diffusion in the medical field. Technology certainly affects our culture. You know, if we didn't have cars, if we had horses, things would be different. Then, and if we had airplanes, didn't have airplanes, trade and everything else would be different. And certainly the internet has had an impact, and computers. Ask yourself the question, is dishonesty or telling lies, being dishonest, more prevalent now because of the internet, because you can say what you want and nobody really knows who you really are, even though you say you're somebody. To get what you want, you can be untruthful And so that happens more regularly now than ever before. It's always been around, but I'll bet you if you look at the data that's out there being done by social scientists and the like, you'll find that that's increased. Certainly your physical chemical environment does affect your culture, and laws and the political environment affect your culture. So these are some of the things that influence the way we live. So when we're talking about being sensitive and aware of what's going on in the culture, you kind of keep your eyeball on what's going on in these different areas.